Hey everyone, it has been a long time, but I'm finally back. And in this episode, we are talking about the TiltBaxxEQ from Roger Schult and why I think this API 500 module should be in your collection as well. So let's go straight into it.
The TiltBaxxEQ, as its name suggests, consists of two different EQ types or filter types. We have a Baxandall EQ for the high and the low frequency, and we have a Tilt EQ in the middle. Some of you might know a Baxandall EQ. You can think of it as a really simple shelving EQ that has been used predominantly in hi-fi for the bass and treble controls on your hi-fi system. And for a good reason. They are incredibly smooth and they don't alter the sound too much. They are actually subtle, but create these really nice curves. And you can set the two Baxandall EQs with those dip switches here. So I can bypass the low and the high Baxandall EQ if they are in the middle. But if I put them to the left side, I hope you can see that, then I have a 2K corner frequency, or if I go to the right, I have a 5K corner frequency. And then I can cut or boost by 12 or minus 12 dB with that slider here. The same is true for the low frequency. So in the middle position, it's bypassed. If I go to the left-hand side, I get an 80 Hertz corner frequency. So the shelf then works for frequencies under 80 Hertz or 110 Hertz. And again, the slider then is cutting or boosting the frequency. Then we come to the star for me. That is the Tilt EQ. I love the Tilt EQ. Many people don't know what a Tilt EQ is. It is a niveau filter, somebody call that way. But actually what it does is doing two things at the same time. A tilt filter is cutting and boosting at the same time around the corner frequency that you set it to. So we have the tilt frequencies down below here. We have 500 Hertz, we have 700 Hertz, and we have 1100 Hertz. And if I now, you can see that here, put the niveau filter to the right-hand side, so I turn it clockwise, what actually is happening is I'm increasing the low-end frequency whilst decreasing the treble. So you're doing two things at the same time. And many people were kind of like confused when the Tilt EQ came out again as a plugin. For example, Illusia did a free plugin, and I highly suggest you all to get that free Illusia plugin from Plugin Alliance. It's amazing. But many people were kind of like confused how it actually works. And it's really easy. You just set the corner frequency and then you cut or boost at the same time around that frequency. And I love this type of working because it creates such a smooth curve. It's brilliant for recording, for mixing, for mastering. It's just there for everything, because there are so many situations where you have problems. For example, like, oh, the mix is too bass heavy, and at the same time, the treble is really like low and it's muddy and stuff like that. You can do that with the TiltEQ. So you decrease the bass, and at the same time, you get this nice bump in the treble, and it actually opens up everything. You will see that later. And then you have the gain control for the plus and minus 12 dB, because you can actually boost by plus and minus 12 dB. The TiltEQ in the middle is 5 dB. So really subtle, really smooth curve. The only thing that I wish that the TiltBaxxEQ would have was a middle position for the gains, because actually I find myself sometimes like bumping over that. Maybe you will see that later in the demos, and then I'm just like, oh, what's happening? Oh, I'm here. Ooh, it's don't get me wrong, it's all manufactured really well. It's really smooth, even the faders. It's just a joy to work with. But it's sometimes, for me, with my big hands, it's a little bit fiddly, to be honest. The main thing, of course, is the sound. I would suggest a TiltEQ to guys and girls that want to start out with recording gear outside of the box. And why is that? Because the TiltEQ is the way you would think of an EQ in the beginning, right? I mean, if something is too dull, if something is too brittle, we just want to like compensate for that, you know. We just want to do like those subtle changes. We don't think normally in the beginning like, oh, I'm like in at 5K and I need to do this, and then I boost and cut, and at the same time I have a linear phase that is then changed, and probably I just create another balance problem, yada 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 yada. This will happen with a normal parametric EQ, which is great. I mean, a parametric EQ is amazing. But what I'm saying is, if you're trying to start out and you want to just go into the nitty-gritty, then maybe the TiltEQ is the right choice for you. That's all I'm saying. So try that out. You will be absolutely surprised how intuitive this way of working really is. All right, I talked an awful lot again. Let's go into the audio demos. I have this one dub track here that I'll use a lot because it has some certain attributes where I can highlight the powers of the TiltBaxxEQ very easily. So, as you can hear, lots of elements, very sub-heavy track. But what if I tell you I can make it more defined? So I set the tilt frequency now to 500 Hertz. And I set the high frequencies, the bypass, and I go into that. So, TiltBaxxEQ is now engaged. And I get this silvery, nice curve. So I increased the highs whilst I was decreasing the low end. Sure. This is a dance track, so we need the low end energy back, right? So let's take both bands to 80 Hertz. And you can hear how I can bring back the low end energy. Let's listen to the original. And back in. Amazing, right? Got a lot of definition, a lot of smooth high end. It's almost like a Pultec EQ. You create those really smooth curves, and you wouldn't do that necessarily in the DAW. If you would work that with a Fab filter or any type of like digital EQ where you would get a graphical response, these types of curves often look very strange to you. And because you don't want to have a strange looking thing going on, you rather not do it. So this can become a problem. So with this sets of controls, it becomes very, very easy to do. And just for the sake of it, let me just increase the high end. But we don't need that here, but let's do it nonetheless. So I boosted 2K with 8 dB. It's a lot, but it's a smooth curve, remember, you know, it has a really nice slope. It's like there's a blanket on it. It's just like completely gone. Some elements are just like gone. And that's the beauty. The thing again, like I told you, I would now have to compensate for audio loss or gain with those two gain knobs. That's a little bit fiddly for me sometimes, but it's worth everything because the sound is so great. Amazing, right? And I can also go back and increase the low end. Okay, this is maybe a little bit too much, but you get the idea. We could even like create completely insane curves, and I can go higher with the tilt frequency. So let's go to 1100 Hertz, so it's even crazier. The muddiness is gone. I can increase to 5K, so it's a little bit more subtle. Astonishing. Back to the Tilt EQ, so only the Baxandalls are working. You know, that's the interesting part, you know, I let's put it to maximum. You hear how I have this really like overly emphasized frequencies which are just like fighting the track, and that is because we are not balancing it out. It's just like highs and lows again, more or less, right? It's too much, but if I begin to tilt, and especially for those kind of tracks, master bus tracks, I go to 500 Hertz because between 200 and 500 there's a lot of like energy where a lot of like masking is happening. And this is how I would work on the master bus.
So this is my review of the TiltBaxxEQ from Roger Schult. If you have any questions, as always, write them down in the comment section below, and I see you in the next video.